Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, a mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Welcome into the podcast, listeners. Excited to be here with you again this week, talking about morning time. I wish I just had $1 for every time that I have fielded a question about mornings. It seems like mornings are the most high stress time of life. And of course, we're in summertime right now. Maybe it doesn't feel quite so stressful as it does during the school year, which I totally get. But I think getting out of the house on time, no matter what time of day it is, can be really, really stressful. Also, no matter what age your kid is, right? Like whether it's your teenager who's primping and losing track of time, or your, 2-year-old who refuses to eat breakfast and brush their teeth or whatever. It can be a Herculean task to get out of the house on time. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips today that are going to make a difference, I hope, in your morning experience or your getting out of the house on time experience. Um, and obviously starting with my confession, I definitely have had my fair share over the 19 years I have been parenting. I have definitely had my fair share of, less than picturesque mornings. And I was sitting down to record this episode. It was almost like this Rolodex of like shame mornings. It was like flipping through my mind. One of the ones that stuck out the most for me was when my daughter was in kindergarten and we had been fighting. Like she would not brush her hair in the morning. She had long, really cute, adorable hair, but she wouldn't brush her hair. And I was actually totally fine with brushing her hair, but she would cry and like wince the entire time. It was awful. And anyone out there with kids with long hair, you probably have had similar experiences, but her hair would just like basically derail our morning, like every morning. And anybody listening to me tell the story now is probably like practically yelling at their AirPods, like, just cut the hair, obviously. But I just, for some reason, did the classic like avoiding. Like I didn't want to cut her hair. It was so cute. And I had wanted a girl like every single time I got pregnant. I finally got my girl. I wanted to be girly, girly, girly with her. And I didn't want to cut her hair. She was like my little doll. It was like cutting my Barbie's hair off or something. So instead, we would just fight, fight, fight. And it all culminated one morning where I just totally lost my temper. I was just like yelling at her all the way down the street because she was making us late. I finally like started walking with the other kids and she's like trailing behind us. I'm like yelling at her. I'm, you know, threatening to cut all her hair off, like like, this poor little kindergartner. I'm like this, trying to have this like adult rant at her about how, you're being selfish and you're not thinking about what's happening with your brothers, and you're not thinking about how you're making every single person late and blah blah blah. Well, of course she's not. She's 6. Like it was a horrible, like I said, shame slideshow that definitely popped up in my mind about like, oh God. When she came home from school that day, I actually cut her hair off. But the cutting her hair wasn't the mistake. It was the like escalation, the yelling, the using verbal tactics to think that that was ever going to make a difference in her behavior. Like all the things, every single thing that I did that morning was just in complete violation of everything I knew about good parenting, even back then, and definitely now. So if you have mornings like this where you're like yanking your kids' arms into their coat sleeves and just yelling at everybody and just driving yourself crazy, this episode is for you. And hopefully, you're not alone now that you're listening to the parenting quote unquote expert tell you that this has happened. This has happened to me. Um, so I'm going to tell you a couple things that can help your mornings get better. And the first thing I'm going to tell you, this is what I do with all my clients, is we make mornings smoother by not working on mornings at all at first. Mornings are this like high stakes, high pressure situation. There's a deadline, right? And so it's really, really hard for us to like stick to our guns and do things super smoothly and all of that stuff. Well, if you start using your new parenting skills that you're going to learn when we work together in the evenings to make bedtime easier or make dinner time easier or make whatever smoother, when the stakes are low, like it doesn't really matter if you dinner at 6 or at 6:30, right? It doesn't really matter if your kid goes to sleep at 7 or 8, right? Like it's not the end of the world. You don't have this deadline. You are going to have so much more success because you are not, like, your pressure is lower while you're implementing these new skills, and that is going to translate into much less stressful morning. So my first tip for you in improving your mornings is don't improve your mornings, improve your evenings. Um, but what I really want to talk about today is the just in case bag. And this is my own invention, but it's definitely basically my own flavor on a love and logic idea. So the whole point about morning times is we need to get out of the house on time, and we want to be implementing all of our parenting skills. And I think this is another reason why mornings can be really stressful for parents, is because we're using like the entire grab bag of parenting skills in this like very discrete, 1 hour or 2 hour like sort of mad dash to get out of the house. And so if you don't have all those parenting skills, really on lock, it's harder, right? It's harder. And this is another reason why starting in the evenings is better, because you have time to think and give yourself permission to strategize and stuff like that. But either way, just remember the principles that we talk about all the time in the podcast, which is, we don't control our children. Instead, we're creating a container inside of which they make their own decisions and experience the outcome of those decisions, right? So it's not, we're going to, you know, you have to have brushed your teeth, gotten dressed, had breakfast, packed your backpack, have your shoes on, blah 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 by 7:30, let's say. That approach leads us to really be controlling our children, right? Like, I have to make you brush your teeth, have breakfast, get dressed, blah 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 blah. There's no choice in there. And this is why mornings are often disastrous for families, because we completely throw out all the things we know that are great parenting tools, like honoring our kids' choice and agency. So, um, instead, we want to look at the morning as a series of opportunities for our kids, and they get to decide how their morning goes. And we get to decide what our boundaries are. So, for example, one boundary might be like the car is leaving at 7:30. That's my boundary. I am going to be driving my children to school at 7:30 in the morning, or to wherever, summer camp or daycare or whatever. 7:30 the car is leaving and I'm going to be driving it. That's one of my boundaries, let's say. Another boundary might be that, I give treats and dessert to kids who have taken care of their teeth. Another boundary might be, you know, uh, I'm happy to do things after school with you when we've had a smooth morning without any disrespectful talk. These are all boundaries that I can set for myself, and my child can choose what they're going to do with that boundary. My child can decide, okay, well, I'm not brushing my teeth today. Cool. Here's how I work. My boundary is I give treats to kids who have protected their teeth. So that's totally your choice. You've chosen not to have treats today. Absolutely fine, right? I've chosen not to have breakfast this morning. That stinks. That's a bummer. And your boundary might be that you say, I don't bring extra food in the car for kids who don't eat their breakfast, for example. That's a perfectly reasonable boundary for you to have. But you can see how now that I'm setting it up as like, hey, this is how I show up in the morning. This is how I relate to people. This is how I show up in my relationship with my kiddo. My kid gets to do whatever they choose and experience and learn from their choices. Right. And so now I can be super calm and relaxed all morning long. And this is where the just in case bag comes in. So the just in case bag is literally just a plastic grocery bag in our family. It is a plastic grocery bag that hangs on the front door knob, and it has, an extra pair of shoes, socks, underwear, pants, shirt. It's just sitting there hanging on the door. And that's all it is. And so when it's time to go in the morning and my kiddo hasn't gotten ready, I can say, oh, we're leaving in about 5 minutes. Looks like you've chosen to use your just in case bag today instead of get ready before we leave. No problem. Cool. No worries. I've already got it ready for us. And that's all I have to say. And sometimes my kid throws a horrible tantrum about the fact that I even mentioned the just in case bag. And sometimes they decide that they're going to hurry and scurry and get ready. And sometimes they don't. And we actually do have to carry the just in case bag to the car because my kiddo's still in their pajamas and wearing no shoes, for example. These are the boundaries that we can set in our family that allow us not to control our kids, not to make sure that they're ready on time because we can't, and not to make sure that they are, acting the way we want them to, or not hysterical or not having meltdowns. We can't control any of that stuff. But I absolutely have control over how I behave in the mornings. And I don't want to be screaming and yelling and starting my day off with a big fight that I feel ashamed of. Shoot, like I just told you the story about my kindergartner. This girl is now 15 years old. Like, I don't want to behave in a way that 10 years from now, I'm still going to feel embarrassed of how my behavior. And so that's my boundary. I am going to show up calmly. I'm going to allow my kid to muddle through and make mistakes and not be upset with them about it and not shame them about it, and let them experience what happens. Like, oh man, I didn't eat my breakfast this morning. Yeah, that really stinks. I hate it when I skip breakfast. I always regret it later. But, the good news is that you have a big lunch waiting for you, and maybe you'll make a different choice tomorrow and make sure that you get breakfast in your belly. We'll see. And I love you no matter what you decide. The just in case bag, this attitude, the just in case bag is really just a physical example of this philosophy that we're talking about, which is you do you, I love you, and I do me. Whoa. It is a totally different way of parenting where we have like infinite space and room for respect and love for our children because we're not trying to do them. We're only doing ourselves. I hope you know what I mean when I'm saying that. Like, I do me. I don't need to make control how you do you. Right. And because I don't need to do that, I don't need to get upset when you do things that I wish you didn't. I don't even wish you didn't. And I don't need to get upset when you do things that I think are mistakes or that aren't going to work out well for you. Like, that's your life. You get to experience that. And I cannot tell you how valuable it is to start embodying these ideas when the stakes are low, when we're talking about getting to school on time or missing out on dessert. Because when you are able to really embody this stuff, when the kids are young, it becomes 10 million times easier to do it when they get older. And we're talking about like, yeah, I think that you probably shouldn't be having sex right now, but you do you. It's your life, it's your body. I mean, oh my gosh, most of the time when I give examples like that, I always love to whip out a high stakes example like that just to be like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe I was able to do it when it came to dessert, but could I do it when it comes to like sex or getting ready for college or, your GPA in high school? Like, that's harder. It is harder. And that's why it's really nice that the universe has designed it so that we get to practice this stuff and like build up our parenting muscles when the weights aren't quite as heavy. So I encourage you to think about the just in case bag. I encourage you to, sort of think about this approach to parenting, give yourself permission to apply it during the times of day when you're not under the gun first and see what happens. And if you know that, doing this on your own is going to be a recipe for disaster and end in defeat, that makes perfect sense. Like, I didn't figure this stuff out by myself for sure. And I really don't know a whole lot of parents who are parenting this way just because they stumbled upon it and figured it out for themselves. Like, this is pretty big deal stuff. It's almost nobody's default way of being in the world. It requires a lot of unlearning and relearning. And it's really hard to do that without a teacher. So I really encourage you to take advantage of that free discovery call that you hear me mention on the podcast. Set it up, sit down with me for an hour and 15 minutes or so. Tell me all the things. Tell me everything you think I need to know so that I can understand your family, help you see where you're getting stuck, and help you see how to unstick yourself. I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.